So, Coleman and Ken, you want to come on up and we'll get started. A quick shout out to Benzinga. We've loved the partnership. We've been doing stuff in the fintech space and now in the cannabis space, and I think today's been a wonderful day, and we're looking forward to Chicago and lots of events to follow. So, social equity, something that I think is getting a tremendous amount of attention, and rightfully so. Excited to talk about it. We're going to try and cover an awful lot of stuff in a really short period of time, and try and just create a conversation between the three of us, but ultimately, hopefully, involve lots of you guys in the conversation. We'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. For us as a firm, the biggest space we're in is community development, and that, generally speaking, includes things like affordable housing, but for the last 2.5 years, cannabis has been, in our mind, a big part of community development. Coleman, you said in a discussion we had, you used the term building communities, and that really is what it's all about, and trying to be as diverse and inclusive as we can, because that's what's going to drive more, I think, more effective commerce that's going to be more beneficial for everybody, and that is the key. I think that's a key that's in a lot of industries and for a lot of good reasons, and I think that we can explore sort of the public-private partnership where legislation and government meets business, and social equity in cannabis is a big part of that. So just to jump right in, maybe each of you could just do a quick intro, sort of talk about your role in this whole social equity process generally and in Michigan in particular. Ken, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ken Bryant. I'm with the Medicine Man of Ann Arbor. We're a family-owned medical marijuana provisioning center in Ann Arbor. My father and brother own the company. We are participating in the social equity program, being that open, operating, minority-owned store, to kind of give guidance to the new participants who want to get involved in the social equity program, to learn if they qualify for it, how to go about getting all of the benefits from the social equity program, and that's pretty much a spill on who I am right now.
And we'll dig deeply into all those issues as we go through this conversation.
Well, hello everybody. Hello, Benzinga. I'm Coleman Alexander Young, former state senator, former state rep, now current principal of Coleman Young Consulting. As a legislator, I introduced the most pro-marijuana bill, so you're welcome. In terms of legalization, I also passed legislation involving regulating the medical marijuana industry. But I think the reason why social equity is so important is because African American men between the ages of 17 and 34 make up 30% of the prison population today. And most of that 30% comes from low-level drug offenses. So these are folks who have been shut out of these type of systems, of these type of opportunities. When you think about social equity, I want you to think about the guy that goes in and applies for a job. And he has to look at the application, and when he's looking at it, it says, have you been convicted of a felony, yes or no? And if he says yes, more than likely he's not gonna get the job. And if he says no, he's on borrowed time, because it's only a matter of time before his employer finds out, and more than likely he's gonna fire him. And what social equity does, it takes that position, which usually comes from a position of shame, and it turns it into an asset. It says that because you were a victim of the war on drugs, which disproportionately had an effect on people of color and poorer people, that separated fathers from their children and mothers from their children, separated children from their families. No one in America should be arrested for possession of medicine. And thank you very much, I appreciate that. Thank you for my ego. Thank you, sir. You're doing wonderfully right now. And so, what you're doing is you're providing people who would usually be shut out of this process an opportunity to be able to afford, you're talking about a 60% reduction guaranteed in terms of licensing fees, in terms of renewal fees, in terms of assessment fees. That's a big deal. Now, I know a lot of people that got capital. Hopefully I can do business with some of y'all before I leave, and I'm sure you do too. But this is about the people who don't have access to that. And we're bringing them in. And we're saying that if you had a record, or if you were a caregiver, or if you're in an area that was hardest hit, And we'll probably get into that a little bit later. So yeah, I'm gonna take time, I'm gonna wrap up. But so that's determined by people who, cities that are 30% in poverty, and cities that have been affected the most disproportionately by high levels of drug arrests or marijuana possession or marijuana arrests. And you're taking that opportunity and you're giving them a chance. You are paving a path, you are opening a door, you are giving folks an opportunity to be able to lift themselves out of poverty. And what you're also doing is, in a time in America where people are underemployed, are overworked and unappreciated, you are giving people high-wage jobs that normally would not have that opportunity. Usually in business, you're here to make money. You're here to make a profit, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. That's what I want to do. But what makes this business so unique is that you also have an opportunity to rebuild communities. You also have an opportunity to rebuild neighborhoods. And I think that's what I want to talk about in conclusion with this business. And so I'm just very thankful to be part of the social equity program.
Thanks. That was great. Very impassioned. And I think we're going to come back to the specifics of individuals and get more localized, but I wanted to maybe step back and look at it from a more national level. There's some statistics out there around the aggregate projected revenue from states that have a social equity program and how significantly that dwarfs the states that do not. Now, part of that may be the fact that you've got California, Illinois, Massachusetts, and now Michigan as part of that, but I think that's for a reason, and I think it's why there's likely to be great success. I think things are happening also a little bit in reverse, right? I think a few weeks ago, post all these states launching programs, Jerry Nadler in the House and Kamala Harris in the Senate introduced a bill, the Marijuana Opportunity and Reinvestment and Expungement Act, I believe it's called MORE, which is really taking a federal approach to the same things that the states were really leading the way in. So I wanted to get both of your perspective on just kind of the national environment and how that can affect or has affected your thinking around your industry involvement and your passion about this particular piece. And then we'll quickly get into more of the Michigan and then the local state, the city stuff. Ken, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was with a NCIA, I think the National Cannabis Institute of America, where they flew us out to California, in Oakland, California. And Oakland, California had a really great social equity program out there to where they had set aside half of the licenses just for convicted felons that had marijuana related offenses. So I think that Michigan and other states kind of started to look and see that these programs were really helpful in giving back to people who are the ones who actually put the marijuana industry on their back for all of those years. Some of them were just trying to feed their families, and now the same reason that they're in jail, the government's now going to benefit from it. So they wanted to give back to these guys who have been making the industry alive, keeping the industry alive while it was still being in prohibition. So I think that Michigan is doing a great job of trying to set up a system for that, because the guys who made our law were like MI legalized and then the Coalition to Treat Marijuana Like Alcohol. And they were trying to give it back to the small business guy. And what they thought was, just like Coleman said, well, the small business guy who's been doing it for years in his neighborhood, he's not going to qualify for this. So they were trying to set this up to bring it back to that small guy who's been hurt by this program, and now it's legal, and he was just on the wrong side of the dates. He was 2 months too early or so, or you could say. So I think they're doing a great job. I don't know, Coleman, what do you think?
Well, no, I totally agree with you. You hit it right in the head, if I could just piggyback. I also think that what you had is you had somebody who was doing this business underground for a very long time. And then once it became legal, these folks were shut out. And so the same thing they got arrested for and spent years in jail for. You know, you have some stories like Bernard Noble in Louisiana, who spent a very long time in prison just for possession of marijuana. And now you have people who are coming in here legally who are taking advantage of it and who are making money off of it. And the people who had their lives destroyed can't get in. And I think that's what social equity does. It allows people who normally couldn't be able to get in to have an opportunity, and it's just good business all around. According to Marijuana Business Daily, those states that have social equity programs, they do $12 billion in revenue sales, compared to states that do not only do $4.1 billion in revenue sales. So just overall business, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think Bill Gates really kind of talks about this when he talks about creative capitalism. Basically, that capitalism is not just used to make a profit, but it's also used to contribute a social good. And I think that here, if this is done right in the right way, this can not only be big business, but also contribute to a social good and making our lives better. And go ahead.
What I learned too, I don't know if you can relate with this, is a lot of these guys with the marijuana-related offenses, they're actually very smart businessmen, and they don't even know it.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
Very talented.
They're dealing with inventory control. They're dealing with employees keeping them there all the time.
Or they do know it, and that's a reason to get them involved.
Right.
It's going to make everybody
Right.
a whole lot more successful.
Just don't have the capital and the opportunity, and that's why this program is so good, because it gives them that would they not have. And I just want to say this real quickly before I'm done. This is different than when you look at big tobacco or when you look at big alcohol, in the sense that we are bringing people that, they say that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, bring a lot of people with you. And that's what this social equity program is doing. It's bringing a lot of people with us in a way that these other big businesses have not, in a way that these other big businesses will not. And so I think that if we do this right, this will really be something that will be transformative, not just in terms of from a profit motive, but also from an economic development standpoint as well.
So in terms of doing it right, I want to get into the part that probably is it wasn't easy to get where we are, and then I want to get into where we're going.
Yeah.
So Coleman, you spent a lot of time, obviously, in the legislative effort. Ken, I'm sure you were a party to it as well. So talk a little bit about what was, where were their objections, how were they overcome, and how does that set us up for something really special going forward?
Well, there was objections in everything. I mean, look, when I first got started, it was like the majority of both parties had saw Reefer Madness movie and thought it was facts. You know what I mean? It wasn't that they were ignorant. It was just what they knew was wrong. And so it was an education process in terms of what this is and what this does and how this works. And you had some people who were in favor of medical marijuana but didn't want anything to do with recreational marijuana. And they just thought that this was just something that big business was going to come in here, it was going to take advantage of a lot of people. And they didn't really understand the economic opportunities. They didn't really understand the ladder. They didn't really understand the skill set that people in these communities that have been hardest hit by the war on drugs has. Like we just talked about earlier, the ability of inventory, the ability of being able to understand the product, to grow the product, to know the product, distribute the product. They have those skills already. They have those connections already. And so it would just be a natural fit for them to be able to transition to a legal industry from an illegal industry. They just didn't have the opportunities and they didn't have the capital available. And that's what makes social equity so important. I think what the problem was on the state level is now the problem that we're seeing locally, in the sense that people have now legalized marijuana because they understand it from a criminal justice standpoint, how wrong this was and how damaging this has become. But I still think you have some mentality of people who feel that not in my backyard or not here in this city, and that's why you're having these elections that are not necessarily passing or being successful just because people don't understand. And I think that's where we're going to have a real educational conversation and effort in order to make sure that we can convince people about what the economic opportunities are for people to be able to work, and the jobs and the ownership opportunities from minorities that does not exist for anybody else the same way it exists for this business. And I think if we start doing that in these communities with the education process and talking to them about social equity and how we're cutting costs and how we're giving them opportunity, access to resources from the state, and how maybe I'm sure in the future it will evolve into financial capital and other such things that they might need in order to start a marijuana business successfully. I think once we start getting that ball rolling, I think that the sky's the limit.
And Ken, I think education is something you're passionate about and
Yes.
something you're going to get very involved in. So maybe piggyback on that and talk a little bit about education and the specific tenets of the Michigan program.
Yes, and I was on Am I Legalized helping these guys collect signatures as a volunteer a few years back to get this program going. And I remember it was very difficult like Coleman said, to break the stigma with the politicians, to get them to see that this wasn't necessarily going to be an evil that they're letting come aboard, that it was going to be some positivity, a lot of positivity dealing with medical marijuana. And I think the biggest thing with the education is that now since we have this program, a lot of the people who should benefit, they're nervous and don't think that they can because they've been shunned out of everything for so long, to where a lot of these guys don't even know that they're eligible for this program. A lot of them don't even know that they can now do this legally. So I think that a big part for us is going to be to go out and educate these guys to not be nervous or scared or think that this on your record is going to come back to haunt you, or this is going to pop up. This is for you. This is for you to benefit. We're trying to give this back to your community, to you, so you can help benefit and raise that community back up. So I think with educating a lot of guys is going to be the main point in telling them, hey, this is how you get involved. The first thing you're going to need to know is real estate. You're going to get that location. You got to find that first. Get you a great attorney who knows everything about this industry in and out. We have a really good one with Mike DeLaura and Denise Policella. These guys are excellent. They taught us things that we didn't even know were coming ahead of time. So these guys that are helping to build these bills and have the relationships with the MRA and they know what's going to come is really helpful to alleviate a lot of that worry. A lot of the fear comes from the unknown, and a lot of these people don't know what's to come, so fear will paralyze you, so now they don't want to try it. Now they're scared. A lot of the caregivers we talk to are asking them, how come you're not trying for this program to get a license? Oh, I never get a license. I got this is not going to work. They just don't even want to hear it. So I think a lot of it is going to be educating them, breaking that stigma, and teaching them and kind of holding their hand and bringing them along and showing them. I think that's why they put us on that social equity board, was to kind of be that light to show them this can be done. We will show you how.
And there are a host of things happening, right? Reduced fees, some technical assistance, a bunch of things that will make it sort of more manageable economically and create a more level playing field.
Yes.
And can I just say something really quick? I just want to say thank God for the people of Michigan who saw past their leadership, who saw past certain leaders in Lansing, and who voted to legalize this. I think it just really shows that the people are ahead of leadership, whether it be in Washington or whether it be in Lansing or whether it be at any political level on this issue.
And I think, too, though, there is, in terms of just what success looks like, there is some preference for existing license holders and the extent to which it may take a little more time. Maybe that gives you more time for education, but the fact that you do have folks that are going to get a bit of a preference because they're already in the space, at least legally. What does that look like in terms of timing in your mind? And talk a little bit about how you think about success, what success looks like.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say with that one, I'm not worried about it, but I'm kind of contemplating or kind of thinking on that issue as well, because just maybe an hour ago I got an email about one of the 19 cities that will be a part of the social equity program. They've adopted into the adult use, but they're saying that they want those groups to also have a medical marijuana license, so that kind of negates the social equity aspect of it. That was to give it to the guy who couldn't afford to show that he has $300,000 in liquid capital that's all legal and been taxed for years. So some of this is going to play out with the state coordinated with the local cities and their ordinances. That's going to be where that city is going to say, hey, we're going to set aside half of these licenses for the social equity participants. That's what's going to need to take place, because a lot of these cities that I'm looking on here, like right now, say for instance, Ypsilanti, they already have their 7 and it's capped. If they're going to just let those medical marijuana stores opt in, then there's no room for the social equity program. Saginaw's not on board.
But the target is 50%, right?
50, right.
Yeah.
They want 50. And like Ypsi, they have it all already. Saginaw's not opted in. Pontiac doesn't want adult use. They just want medical. So I think that a lot of this is going to be when the state goes out to these cities, I think they're going to then rethink their stance on their ordinance and make it more welcoming for the social equity program. So it's just not a farce that we're just talking about things, but they're actually seeing that these people are getting the licenses that are coming aboard.
I think success for me is basically when you have marijuana that's treated like alcohol or tobacco. I think in terms of where it's sold, I think in terms of how it's sold. I think success for me is when you have people who represent or look more like America who are able to participate in this. I mean, in the cannabis industry, 37% of the cannabis business executives are women. I mean, that's like 16, I think, % higher than the national average. So I think these are things to me in terms of social equity, because and I like the title of social equity, because instead of it being social equality where everybody gets the same, where social equity is where you get what you need. And so I think that that's what this program really, to me, and what success really looks like, is when you can have people from across the board who can participate in this. And it really kind of just defines the American dream, that if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to play by the rules, if you're willing to do the right thing, that you can become successful. And I think this gives people an opportunity that normally would not have that chance, or who would be looked over, or who would be ignored completely because of their record, or because of these cities where they live in, where you have heavy incarceration, that these people can have the opportunity, not the guarantee, not the promise, but the opportunity to become successful and become financially independent through the cannabis industry. I think that's tremendous.
I completely agree. Curious though, on the city side, so 19 cities here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in some states where there isn't a social equity program, there are cities that have looked to create something within the city. I'm curious your thoughts about how some of these cities will react. Will they double down? Will they want to do more? Will they prefer to do less but be stuck with something in the state? Where's that going to shake out?
Well, we've had some votes so far. Highland Park voted against it, I think. I think Royal Oak did as well. Detroit has capped it at 65, I believe, and they're talking about capping recreational at 28 or 29, somewhere within that number. Don't exactly quote me. I think that we've made tremendous strides and tremendous progress locally, but I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of educating people locally what this is. You have some people who still have that stigma of what marijuana is. I don't want this in my backyard. I don't want this in my neighborhood. I don't like, the way it smells or what have you. And what we have to start talking about is what this means to people who are looking for jobs and opportunities out there. To the person who has gone from job to job to job to job to job, who cannot find work, to the person who works 2-3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. The cannabis industry, through social equity, is an opportunity for that person to be able to get a job and be in a high-paid job. And I think that's really what we need to start talking about. Like, I live in a neighborhood maybe a couple blocks away from Utopia Gardens. Fantastically ran medical marijuana facility. And there's a lot of facilities like that in Detroit, and a lot more that want to come into the city. It's just educating the leadership about what this is and what this has, and the abilities of what this has. Medically what this could do for people. Financially what this could do for people. I think that's something that we really need to start having that conversation about. That this is not just a medicine, but it's also an opportunity for people to be able to achieve what they want to do as business owners, to be able to put their kids back into school, to be able to live the life that is more comfortable for them because they chose to be in this line of work, as well as transform a lot of these cities that have been deteriorating, or that have from manufacturing that has left, from disinvestment, from high crime areas, from high mass incarceration. You gotta understand, the city in Wayne County Jail right now, then I'm gonna wrap up. In Wayne County Jail right now, I know, I'm a politician, I like to talk, y'all. So, in Wayne County Jail right now, 62% of the folks that are in there because they can't afford the bail to get out. That's what we're dealing with around here. 40% of the city is living in poverty today. And so this is the program that's going to counteract that. I'm not saying it's a panacea. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but it's something. You're talking about a $1.7 billion industry? That's a big deal. 18,000 jobs across the state projected by 2023, that's a big deal. And so we want to make sure that people have, anyone and everyone who wants to get involved has access to that.
And that, it seems to me, is the key. In addition to the personal journey, the personal story, there is the economic development that is going to benefit everybody, I think without question.
Right.
I am curious, too, there are some provisions that would require a real connection to the communities that folks are going to get preference in, which makes perfect sense. But there still could be a way for folks to collaborate, to find what I'll call joint ventures, for lack of a better term, to really expand themselves and the benefit this can have for other companies from other places that could really be an interesting component to the economic development.
Right. Did you want me to?
I even think with the social equity program, it's going to be a lot of opportunity for people who wouldn't qualify for the social equity program, but to team up or partner with somebody who will. Because a lot of those cities are going to hear about this program and they're going to want to implement that to show that their city is trying to rebuild itself through the state of Michigan social equity program. And now they may have a little preference on getting that license, and that may be who you want to team up with, because if they are somebody who qualifies for this program, they may need the capital. So then you should be able to you should be looking for partnerships or strategic partnerships to team up with people in the social equity program, even if you don't qualify.
I think, and I just want to explain this too. So if you are in an area where you qualify the 19 areas, so if you have an operated business in the 19 areas that are heavily hit by the war on drugs, you get a 25% discount in fees. If you are a majority share, if you're an individual or individuals that are majority shareholders in the business, and you have a criminal record from arrest from a marijuana conviction, you would qualify, and it's in one of the 19 areas, you would qualify for a 25% reduction. And you would qualify for a 10% reduction if you're in one of the 19 qualified areas and you were a caregiver. Thank you. You were a caregiver. So that equals up to 60%. And I think that one of the major problems that we have is people who are not, that I hear all the time, is people who are not able to get in this business because they don't have the money. And anytime you talk to anybody who was anti-marijuana, I remember I had a debate once with Kevin Sabat about this a while ago. And they were basically talking about, very anti-marijuana, talk about this, talk about getting this business. They talk about lack of access fundamentally to capital. And that's what this program does. It takes that away. It takes what was once used systematically as something to prohibit someone from getting into this, from something now that will be used for them to actually help get a leg up in this business. And I think that's something that's critical. And like I said earlier, it's just good business for everybody around. There's gonna be more sales, there's gonna be more jobs, there's gonna be more opportunities. But I just want you to understand with this program, it's just so much more than just the traditional business climate here. We are talking about real economic growth, and if it's done right, and if the investment is done right, real economic change for real people on the ground. You got plants that are closing and around this, or I say here and around the region. There are going to be people who are going to be looking for jobs. Now they're building one over there off the east side of the city of Detroit, but only so many folks are going to be able to get those jobs. And so the ones that can't are going to be looking. And I think this is a perfect opportunity with the right, if it's done the right way, and it's done with the right people, which I think we all have right here in this room. I think it could go a long way in terms of transforming the city of Detroit and the country.
So economic development, breaking down some social barriers, an awful lot of good stuff that just seems to make a lot of logical sense. We've got a few minutes left. Some questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, you. Yes. No, you. You stay on the gate. No, I got you. Yeah, in the white. Yes.
The difference that I see in this Michigan program is there's no points for if you have, given back to the community, had a marijuana conviction. The only thing the benefit I see in this Michigan program are those fee reductions, which are those 25, and the 10%.
Right.
But what about the fees that you acquire when writing an application, hiring a consultant, hiring an attorney, an accountant? A lot of people can't get into this industry, especially people of color, because, like, to your point, they can't afford it. But these fee reductions are just on the $6,000. But what about actually writing an application, a business plan? Like, what about helping, applicants from these 19 communities with that? That's something I see. And then also an issue I see with the Michigan program is, like, out in LA, they were basically buying black faces to be, the face of this social equity, application, when this big, corporation from Denver or something was trying to get a dispensary in LA County, and they bought, one of us who had a zip code. How are you gonna kind of combat if that were to happen in Detroit, for instance?
That's gonna be hard. I see that happening. Right now, it's pretty much to where with the social equity part of it. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
No. You're right here. I was just gonna say I think that's why we got to make sure that we stay on top of Laura as well, to make sure that they regulate this the right way. I mean, that's what you're paying those assessment fees for, is that they can provide these type of services. I would also say that no legislation is perfect, but I think it's something that we have to work on. 'Cause I think what you're saying is absolutely right, and I don't see that included in this legislation, but I think that's something that we can build on. And I think that's something we need to have a conversation with future legislators when we talk about this, about making sure that we have those programs included, because you're absolutely right. And there's a lot more things that we can include in here. This is just that first step. It's a first start towards a longer process. And I think we just stay vigilant within the process, we can fix a lot of what you're talking about. Go ahead.
And now I remember, what we was going to say was that I don't see any help with the fees or the costs, but it is going to be like a one-stop resource center where when you come out to the educational program, we're going to be telling you which lawyers, accountants, architects, engineers, real estate agents. It's going to be a one-stop shop where you can get all your resources there. And I don't know if there's going to be a way that we can approach some of those guys and see where they give you a reduced fee for being a social equity partner.
I will say, too, I know we got to wrap up. I think that the WAR Act, while it's federal legislation, does contemplate creating a pool of money to kind of support some of what you're talking about. I think it would need to happen more at the state or local level, and probably with follow-on legislation.
I think once they do that 280E legislation as well in terms of banking and things of that nature, I think it'll really open up and change game plan. You're right about that.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time. I want to thank Coleman and Ken for a great conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
And